Good morning, Trumptopia. A special segment of the Almost Daily Zencast. Hosted by the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Let's talk Trump.
Welcome back, everybody. If you haven't watched and or listened to it yet, please go to the internet and type in The Squad News Conference and take a gander, take a listen, take a moment to really hear these women and ask yourselves, do they sound like communists? Do they sound like they hate America? I think one of the most important things that was said was Congresswoman Presley urged us to not take the bait. I'm going to let her explain herself here because I'm going to go ahead and just play it right off the interwebs for you. I think I can.
I want to say thank you to all of you for being here today. And I want to send a message of gratitude and thanks to the solidarity that we have received from every corner of our country. From our colleagues to our neighbors, we are grateful for your solidarity, your encouragement, and your support in the face of the most recent xenophobic, bigoted remarks from the occupant of our White House.
That sounds so not full of hate. That sounds like gratitude to me. That sounds like solidarity. That sounds like a really well articulated opening to her speech, in my opinion. I mean, I could be wrong. If anybody listening to my show as an oppositional audience, hey, I welcome that, by the way. Pause, sidebar. If you're a fan of the show, I think I've said this before, but if you're a fan of the show, please invite your Trump supporter friends in your life to come check it out. I'm not trying to fool anybody. I want Trump-based listeners. You know why? I want to hear their intelligent comebacks, and I want to be able to address them on my show. I digress. Let's come back here to Madam Presley and see what else she has to say.
I will always refer to him as the occupant, as he is only occupying space. He does not embody the grace, the empathy, the compassion, the integrity that office requires and that the American people deserve.
Is that a hateful, rhetorical, just blind hate rage statement against the president? No. That is a really thoughtful and well articulated statement about what he's actually doing. He likes to announce himself as the greatest president of all time, but the actual, legitimate, practical facts of the matter on the ground is that he's a clusterfuck of half measures and mostly sort of fails that he claims to be wins. Right? And I'm not saying that out of hate. I'm saying that out of like, wow, if I was a Trump supporter, I would be disappointed by now. If I had voted for him, I'd be beyond sort of like, well, he just needs a second chance. He just needs the media to get off his back. No, I'd be like, dude, this dude is a scam by now. Obviously, I never voted for Trump and I never supported him because I was well aware of him since like the late 80s, early 90s. Okay? And he is what he is. He's a blowhard, a scam artist, a greedy elitist who aspires to be more wealthy than he's been capable of achieving for himself. He aspires to be more powerful than he has up until this crazy new chapter. He's always been aspiring to more greatness. But his definition of greatness is a really particular kind. his aspiring to greatness is, as Nancy Pelosi pointed out, one that's entirely embedded and or anchored in whiteness. But I digress. We're here to listen to Madam Presley. Let's see what else she said. I just want to applaud her because I think that was one of the most legitimate and very real critiques that was also a hardcore burn.
That being said, I encourage the American people and all of us in this room and beyond to not take the bait. This is a disruptive distraction from the issues of care, concern, and consequence to the American people. That we were sent here with a decisive mandate from our constituents to work on. Everything from reducing the cost of prescription drugs, to addressing our affordable housing crisis, to ensuring that the American people have more than health insurance, but health care.
I'm going to pause it right there, in part because I don't want to be too grossly in violation of, as an amateur who does not have a production company behind his back, paying for all the access rights to all this media that I occasionally reference. I don't want to get too egregious, right? I do it with respect. I'm not trying to fuck anybody over. I'm not trying to profiteer on this media outlet's access. So, but let's pause it right there and talk about what she just said. In theory, we elect people to office because they are there to represent us. I don't know how and when exactly it became super trendy to replace represent with fight for, and to rationalize how fighting for is the same and or equivalent and or even worse, superior to representation. But I'd like to point out that those are two really different words that invoke two different modalities of action. We, in theory, elect these representatives to then represent our interests and negotiate with each other as, collective whole of representation, as a body that represents multiple segments of the American public. They're supposed to negotiate with one another in order to achieve goals for the common good, for the greater good of all Americans. I've been paying attention to politics pretty much since somebody shot at Ronald Reagan. That's what really lit me on fire. Ronald Reagan was adorable. He was cute. He was funny. He was fun to watch. He was like a grandpappy that was a little goofy and charming and who happened to be president, right? He was like somebody's uncle, everybody's uncle or grandfather, just like a charming, goofy, weird old guy that was president. At least, I'll admit I was pretty young back then. But I was also pretty fucking aware. I was at that time already questioning why it was that no matter what these representatives said, the problems had been clearly persisting for decades and decades and decades, even then, okay? And now, decades later, here we are. None of the actual ideological fights that we were fighting back then have changed very much. And guess what, everybody? We're still fighting over them now. Now, while I currently respect and admire this freshman class as a whole in Senate and Congress, because she's right. Assuming the best, assuming the noblest of intentions, this last wave of elections into Congress and the Senate was truly a mandate, mandated by the people. But here's the trend I've noticed over time. Even the most valiant, even the most sincere-sounding politician, over time, after decades of being in office, you look back and guess what? the majority of them bend and or break. Very few remain the firebrands who vote against the common interests of the wealthy who cajole, manipulate, and bribe through lobbying. It's funny. In any other foreign country that pretends to be an upright standing democracy, the act of lobbying is called bribery. The act of lobbying, the way we do it here in America, is called bribery. There's still a form of lobbying in other countries, but what I'm pointing out is that in America, lobbyists straight up give politicians money they don't need. My entire life, politicians have been wealthy. Now, this is the first time that I've seen. Of course, Let me step back from that statement a little bit. That was pretty absolute sounding and pretty big, giant, broad strokey, sort of ignoring all the exceptions to the rules. There have always been exceptions to the rules, right? Arguably, mighty Ben, not Ben, what's his name? Sanders. What the fuck is his first name? Jesus Christ. I started thinking of Mighty Joe Young for some reason, and I wanted to turn that into some positive moniker for Mr. Sanders. But Sanders has been one of those people that appears to have pretty straightforwardly stuck to what he believes in. But I bet if we drill down into his record, we'd be like, that's interesting, weird vote that he committed here and there. I don't know, right? I haven't done that research today. I'm just talking about it off the top of my head. If you look back, just look at where we are today. Right? Every election, people of all kinds have stood up in front of us in our local voting districts and in our, at rallies and in front of us on our TVs and said, there's something wrong with government. Government is broken. Government is evil. Government is corrupt. Now, mind you, left and right have said this. Or something up this alley. And then they've punctuated with vote me for office. I believe that government is evil and corrupt, so vote me into office. Well, 30 years of that, and is government still corrupt? Seems like it's gotten worse. Is government evil? It's starting to feel that way, isn't it? So, on face value, there seems to be something that happens in between that moment where those firebrands that catch our imagination and our hearts and our hopes, that they're really going to, quote, fight for us, the little guys, begging us for our money, our attention, our devotion, our psychological, emotional, and energetic support, our volunteering effort, and our vote. And then somewhere between that and then they've been in office for 10 years, something happens. Something happens. Not to all of them, but to a huge plurality of them. Right? Enough of them seem to sort of waffle on everything and then sort of become more and more increasingly obviously kind of just puppets. Is that going to happen to the squad? I don't know. I hope not. I've always thought that it was probably more common for men to fall into that ego trap than women, mostly because men in our society, as we've lived through it, are coached, conditioned, and, dare I say it, brainwashed into believing themselves to be worthy of more in an egocentric, sociologically pathological kind of way. That's what being manly man is, right? You deserve the sexiest girl. You deserve the shiniest car. You deserve the biggest house. You deserve the greatest job that's both lazy and makes you the most money. Because you're a man. A white man. And everybody else does not deserve it. Tell me that conditioning is not inherent in our culture, and we're going to have an interesting discussion there. But I digress. I'm not criticizing anyone directly. I'm criticizing the system. Because it seems like the system is really effective at seducing people whether they want power and glory and money, or whether they want reform and change and to achieve the greatest good for all, the system seems to be really good at seducing them into just accepting the status quo and to keep playing the parts that they get assigned to, so that we all feel like there's a fight going on, so that's good. And yet, in the end, we're still in some quagmire of war, or multiple endless quagmires of war. And yet, the rich keep getting richer. The oligarchs garnish more and more control. And the working poor get poorer. And the destitute get more and more vilified. I digress, right? I hope and pray that this freshman class, and especially these powerful women in office, that they are going to resist whatever that is, whatever that seductive mechanism that's part of the political system that seduces people into sort of giving up their true intentions and putting on the masks of being just another puppet, good cop versus bad cop, white hat versus black hat, to make noise instead of change. I hope they resist it. I hope they not only resist it, I hope they identify it and call it out and shut it down. So I digress. Let's not take the bait. Is Donald Trump a racist? Obviously so. Do we need to open the eyes of his base towards that? Yes, there's a struggle there. But we also need to acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, and I dare you to say this to your Trump supporter friends. I'm sure you've got some, right? You've got to have a circle of friends diverse enough that have someone in there that you've got, friends or family or whatever. We all got one. Like, yeah, well, even if they're equivocal or kind of waffly about it, and they're like, yeah, well, he's not that bad. I disagree with him, but... the evidence is clear that he's a racist, right? And then we got to ask the base, is it possible? Is it possible? And you got to say this with love and compassion and kindness, mind you, because what we're addressing is a disease. It's a spiritual disease. You got to ask them, hey, is it possible, dear Trump supporter friend and or family member, that you don't recognize Trump's racism because you agree with it? Now that's a huge can of worms to crack open. Let me tell you, every time I've asked that of somebody, they shut down. And I only had the opportunity to ask that of people who are accusing me of falsely accusing Trump of being racist. I'm like, wait, hold on. Here's the evidence why I think he is such, right? Is he an overt, he's going to kill black people kind of racist? No. He's this postmodern super savvy. He's going to surround himself with just enough black people so you can kind of doubt it. He's got, like, somebody on the news yesterday was like, well, he's got an Asian lady in his cabinet, so he can't possibly hate women of color. Okay. Yeah. But there's a line to be drawn, right? We've got to call it out. And we've got to help our brothers and sisters who refuse to acknowledge it by planting seeds and asking questions, not fighting with them. Don't fight with your uncle about whether or not Donald Trump is a racist. Ask him or her, because it could be your aunt. Ask them why they think he is not. Ask them why they think this question or that question or this statement or that statement. Get specifics. Be like, hey, so it's not racist of the Trump family to have screened out black people from their properties? It's not racist of Donald Trump to have called for the death penalty during for the Central Park 5, when there wasn't a death penalty option at the time, I don't think. I could be wrong about that, historically speaking. But it wasn't racist of him to demand the death penalty even after they were exonerated and proven to be innocent, because he's never relented. He's never apologized. Explain to me, dear Trump supporters, how it is not categorically racist of him to use demagoguery to vilify brown-skinned immigrants and then hire them in a profiteering, he's going to pay them less than white people kind of way, at his own properties. If that isn't de facto textbook racism, I don't know what is. Let's remember, racism is not just about hate. It's the most painfully obvious expression of it. Racism is really more explicitly about abuse through an elitist paradigm that dehumanizes people who look different. That's why America has a history of being racist against their own fellow Europeans, right? Remember, America hated the Irish. I'm talking about not politically speaking, not like as a leadership issue, but when the Irish came here in large numbers because, there was a famine going on in Ireland. What did they say to those Irish workers working shitty-ass jobs that other people didn't want to work? They said, go back home to your country where you belong. So it's not just about white versus black. It's about my group is real and my group is human and your group is fake. Your group is not human. My people are virtuous and righteous de facto no matter what they do, and your people are villainous and disgusting and inhuman no matter what you do. That's at the core of racism. That's emotional violence, and that's of course patently hate no matter how calmly you state it. But the confusion here, the reason a lot of people who support racists have a hard time calling out that racism is because the racism is now distributed in a way that's like jolly and delightful. It's calm. Trump's never punched a black person. Trump's never punched a dark brown-skinned person. But the people who support him, who work for his administration and running those detention camps, which, by the way, let us never forget, they are for-profit centers of detention, operated by people who have strong ties and connections to Donald Trump directly. And in those centers, let us not forget, the people who rabidly support Donald Trump have not only abused these immigrants through neglect, they've also hurt them physically, attacked them sexually, and have facilitated their disappearance. Babies are disappearing from these camps. That's not a made-up leftist accusation. That is something that's acknowledged by the observers who've gone in to be like, hey, what's going on? Like, give me facts about what's going on in here. That's acknowledged by people that are part of the system of those camps. They're like, well, we can't find these kids. We don't know where they are. Remember when the whole thing started, there was no tracking mechanism at all? But I digress. The bait that we've been encouraged not to take here by Congresswoman Presley is the bait of anger, the bait of hatred, the bait of emotional, psychological, and or physical violence. I've spoken about this before. Remember a few months ago or a couple of years ago, however long it was ago, because Trumptopia is so compressed and so fucking high volume in terms of shit that goes on every motherfucking day that it feels like it's been 100 years and it's only been 3 or 4. But remember when it was like super popular to be like, we got to go punch a Nazi? People don't like this. This is a hard pill to swallow, my friends. And this is why I'm just as much... I easily offend the left as much as I offend the right. But the moment you lower yourself to the standards of those who you fear and or vilify, the moment you lower yourself to the standards of the monsters that you're trying to, quote, fight, you become a monster yourself. Don't believe me? Just take a quick look at the last 5,000 years of violence and counter-violence, revolution and oppression, and revolution and oppression, and here we are. Today's moment is a direct result of 5,000 years of violence and counter-violence. I, for one, am tired of it. I, for one, see the pattern, and I'm trying to get others to see the pattern that shows that shit ain't effective. Punching Nazis makes you feel good in the moment because you feel like you've committed some kind of justice, you've achieved some form of justice because that guy was evil and you showed him his place. You cannot chop off all of Hydra's heads. We cannot kill every racist. We cannot kill every Nazi. Because A, we lose our purity. We lose our higher ground. We completely abdicate our moral value when we do that. We give up whatever goodness inside us was keeping us good when we do that. Do not take the bait, folks. This isn't about fighting Trump's base. This isn't about fighting Trump. We need to heal them. And we cannot heal them if we are busy doing toxic things that prevent us from healing ourselves. And I've been pretty darn consistent about that, haven't I? I think. I hope you will acknowledge that. And I hope that that is what inspires you to share my show and help other people hear it. Not because I'm important. I'm not. I'm a nobody. I might die tomorrow and I don't care, right? Like I might fall over dead for all the reasons that anybody might just fall over dead one day. I'm not trying to get famous, although I don't mind getting wealthy because then I can do more. I have a calling. You can call me crazy if you want. You won't be the first. You won't be the last. But I have a calling. And that calling isn't to win. That calling isn't to hate. That calling isn't to fight. That calling is to help you remember that you are a healer. My calling is to help you remember that if this is wrong and you see it as wrong, that you are not helpless. You have the power within you to make that change, and it starts by healing yourself first. We will never win if we throw a bloody revolution against Donald Trump and his, growing empire. We will never win if we keep letting ourselves be seduced by the shiny object of fighting the good fight. There is no such thing. Who was it? Jimmy Carter called it out. There's a great meme. It's finally resurfaced again. I saw it a long time ago, but someone's repackaged it and it's great. And he basically calls it out. It's like, he has a different wording. If the quote is true, he says, war is a necessary evil. But let us never forget that it is evil. Even if it is necessary, it is evil. I go a step further. It is irrelevant. I'll go an even a further step. It is toxic. I'll go a further step. It is an ego trap that keeps us coming back to more violence. If you agree with me, friends, then let's not fight this fight anymore. Let's get busy healing. Let's not worry about whether or not Trump gets impeached. Let's start focusing on healing ourselves so we can heal each other, so we can heal our friends and neighbors and family, so we can heal the species. Because we are all one. Race is imaginary. We are one diverse form of life, and life is one unity. Only ideas and words and ego traps separate us. Don't believe me. Don't take my word for it. Don't follow me, except for, on social media. Don't think that I'm more special than you. Get busy healing. Get busy healing, friends. Because the moment you start healing yourself is the moment that the whole species starts to heal itself. And that is the only thing we are being called to do. Period. Everything else is a waste of time. If what we are doing day to day, moment to moment, is not somehow contributing to our self-healing as a species, it's a distraction. Raiding Area 51 is a distraction. Oh, by the way, something I forgot to mention in that part of the segment. If y'all go to Area 51, they're going to have bigger guns. They're going to have bigger tanks. They're going to have bigger bombs. And they're going to let you create the excuse for shooting you with them. So that's a waste of time, isn't it? And even if somehow a large enough, massive body of volunteers shows up to get butchered at the hands of their own government and gets into that system, there might be some horrible predator waiting to be unleashed to eat us all. So, bad idea, you guys. Every day, I remind myself that no matter how outrageous this bullshit gets, I cannot hate him. I refuse to hate him, Trump. I refuse to hate them, Trump supporters. I refuse to hate all of them, politicians. I can be angry about what they're doing. I can be outraged. I can be impassioned and emboldened to speak out. But I refuse to hate. You know why? Because that's what they want. Not the puppets. They're just puppets. If you know their name and you can see their face, they're a puppet. No matter how corrupt they are. Because the people pulling the strings are that much deeper in the shadows. And they need healing too. That's why they're hiding in the shadows. Throwing levels and levels of front puppets in front of them. They don't care if we jump on the revolutionary bandwagon because they've squashed us before with that by letting us kill each other as long as it takes until we're exhausted. And then they just let us think we've won, and then they just make sure to hijack whoever we put back in power. The people who are truly in charge are protected from violence. And even if you kill them, there's someone deeper in the pocket that's hiding behind that. That's how they protect themselves from the violence. That's why, after 5,000 years of violence, we are here on the precipice of committing more violence against one another. Already committing violence against one another. What am I talking about? Trump supporters are already beating people up. Anti-Trump supporters are already beating people up. You know what they're afraid of, friends? They're not afraid of us standing up. They're not afraid of us speaking truth to power. They're afraid of healing. Those people deep in the dark shadows, the dark side itself, that pit of darkness where ego hides, the only thing they fear is love and healing. And so I pray every day, my friends. I pray really hard to Yeshua and Magdalene, to Mother and Father, to Gaia herself, to the universe itself, whatever fucking nonsense name you want to use, to life, to the light, and to the dark, because the dark and the light are not separate. I think I've already rambled about that enough in past episodes. They are not separate. They're playing this game. And they're experiencing the trauma of the appearance of separation. They are not opposed to each other. They are two components of the same thing that have been virtually ripped apart in the process of manifesting this material realm. That's what we're being distracted from, by the way. All of politics, the noble and the ugly, The good, the bad, and the ugly of politics is all being manipulated by the system of oppression behind that to keep us distracted from the esoteric journey of discovering that the power we all hold within us as individual human beings is transcending this whole paradigm through the healing communion with Source. That's why religions that are organizations are all corrupt. They might preach a lot of the light and the good. They might pay lip service to some healing and some loving. But in the end, there are Christians with guns and bombs. There are Muslims with guns and bombs. There are Jews with guns and bombs. There are atheists with guns and bombs. Let that sink in. That guns and bombs don't solve shit. They just give permission to others who cannot see clearly to take up weapons of death. Not to solve anything, but to feel like they've achieved some retribution, some revenge. The only true justice is healing. Both practical, pragmatic, real-life physical healing, like, hey, we should storm those centers and heal those sick people that we've been traumatizing. And of course, at that higher level, spiritual healing. The meme I didn't make during this whole Storm Area 51 craze of distraction. Oh, I didn't even get to the Epstein shit. Damn it. If I can pin that up, we're going to do another episode down the road about that. Because A, it's all up in the air. B, he might just get home incarceration in his billion-dollar mansion. C, the thing that if there's one thing I suspect Donald Trump is really hoping that his base is distracted from is his overt connection to Epstein. Now, there's a bunch of Trump supporters who are aware of that and are bending over backwards to rationalize that into some sort of secret 7D chess about how he did that 20 years ago so that when he got into office, he could then be in power to expose him through insight. What? No. 20 years ago, never mind. I said we're going to do a whole episode about it later. Let's do a whole other episode about it later. The thing that those who lurk in the shadows, who work through ego, with ego, who are here to keep us distracted and confused and butchering each other so that they continue to ride the merry-go-round meat grinder of profiteering, fear one thing and one thing only: loving, compassionate, transcendent healing of the human species. And I will say that out loud from the rooftop to your face, on the internet, wherever I am, for the rest of my life. Don't care what happens. Because if one person out there goes, holy shit, and then heals themselves, and then helps heal someone else, then it was worth it.
And that is the latest madness from behind the orange wall. Thank you for listening to GMT, a special segment of the Almost Daily Zencast. Stay woke, Trumptopia. Stay woke.